welcome to Meet Me Downtown. I'm Michael and this is Aaron, and we are sitting here with Chris Brown, who is a psychic medium.
Yes.
In the downtown Augusta area. Works a lot with Merkaba Soul. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a father. I play in a band as well. I do martial arts. You know, I'm just an everyday kind of normal guy. I just happen to talk to dead people. I live in Jefferson. We got 2 kids, like I said. They're awesome. They're teenagers, so they're teenagers.
Yep.
But they're awesome too. And I don't know. I do a lot in the paranormal world. You know, like at Parafest coming up this weekend, actually.
Wow.
So that's kind of what I do as well, as long as doing readings for folks on a daily basis.
So I've been wondering, is there a difference between the terminology psychic and a medium?
Actually. So psychic deals more with past, present, future, and medium deals more with people who've passed. So I actually kind of jokingly say that the word psychic medium is redundant because you have to use the psychic faculties in order to do mediumship, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So if I usually just call myself a medium. You know, I won't say that I'm a psychic. I'll just say that I'm a medium. But the terminology is exactly that. So psychic deals, like I said, more with past, present, future, and mediumship is more dealing with those who've passed away.
So when did you first discover that you had this gift?
Believe it or not, it wasn't that long ago. I was only 33 years old. I'm 38 now. I was doing paranormal investigating, and I was at a place called the Parsonsfield Seminary. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that at all.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So it's an old boys and girls kind of school. It was a religious school as well, but it's reportedly very haunted. And, I went in there not knowing I was a psychic or a medium or anything like that. And so I wasn't just investigating, and I was in the attic, and I felt like this little boy was playing games with me. And I was like, this can't be real. I was like, this has got to be my imagination. I have to be making this up, like any other explanation would do. But sure enough, I went home and I YouTubed the same spot. And there was a medium on the team that went there. And she said, there's a young boy spirit here and he's playing games. And I kind of, widened my eyes and I was like, holy cow, like this is exactly what I felt. And so I just started to look into it and research it and what it means to be a medium and kind of like what that entails. And it kind of like checked off all the boxes for me. And I just kind of, I went into it head first and I haven't stopped.
So when you said he was playing games, like, was he like touching you or like, did you feel it? Or
the experience, like how do you describe, I guess, was there a physical aspect? What does that look or sound or feel like?
So so like I said earlier about psychic faculties, and yet you need those to do mediumship. It's the psychic faculties are all of your 5 senses condensed into a 6th sense, quote unquote. You know what I mean? And that 6th sense is just all in your internal consciousness.
Really?
So like if I were to ask you to imagine the fair in Windsor, you could imagine that. You could smell the smells, you could see the sights, you could hear the people, cheering and laughing and things like that. That's kind of how mediumship works and how psychic works. It's with mediumship, it's the spirit that's impressing those images and those feelings and those sights on you, as opposed to you seeing them yourself, if that makes any sense.
So that experience at Parsons Cemetery, Parsons Seminary, I'm sorry. So when you were there, you were experiencing like him just like being playful and like, wanting you to know that he was there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I kind of like, my impression was I felt it more than I saw or heard anything. But what I felt was that he was trying to play like hide and seek. And that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, oh, this little boy playing hide and seek with me. And I was like, like I said, I didn't believe it because I had no reference points to psychic mediumship at all before getting into it. It was never talked about in my family. It was never discussed when I was growing up, that sort of thing. I always used to say I could feel when ghosts are around. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I had no reference points to it. So I thought I was just making it up until I saw that video of the other woman who had said, yeah, there's a little boy here. And I was like, wow, that kind of blew my mind a little bit.
So was it scary at all, or was it?
It wasn't scary. It was just kind of like, I just thought it was my imagination, honestly. I just thought I was making up. I was in a reportedly haunted building and, it was for children. And so I thought I was just making it up. So it wasn't necessarily scary. It was just kind of like, I wasn't really sure what to make of it. I did have a strong feeling in my chest. It felt like anxiety. But what I've learned now is that it was just kind of spirit energy, kind of using my energy to communicate with me.
Now, when you told your family, or that I have this gift and I felt it over at the seminary, what was their reaction to that? Was it skepticism, or was it Yeah.
Yeah, it was skepticism. My mom especially, because she's like, well, if you can talk to the dead, then why can't you talk to your grandfather or your grandmother or things like that? And I'm like, well, they visit me, sure. Do I talk to them necessarily like I do with other people's loved ones? No, because it's a different kind of relationship. But I was met with skepticism. My brother for sure, he thought I was just making it up, just being kind of just me.
How do if your grandparents come and visit, like, how do you experience that?
It's different. It's different for each person. You know what I mean? And so my grandmother, she'll represent herself a lot of the times with cardinals, or dragonflies for sure. So she comes to and she sends me signs that way. I have a friend, Lenny, though, who had passed away a long time ago, and he will flat out like sit with me in my truck. And I'll kind of like, I'll see him in my mind's eye. Like I had said, imagine the affair with your mind's eye. He kind of comes to me in that way. So I'll sit next to it, or he'll be sitting next to me, and I'll just look over and be like, oh, hey, it's good to see you. But it's always nice when they visit. But the communication style is a lot different than when I'm sitting with somebody who is getting a reading.
So you hear from some people who practice mediumship, like they say that there's something like a spirit guide or like a guide that will sort of foster communication between the other side and here. Is that something that you have or have experienced? Or
I definitely think that we all have spirit guides. I think that some of us, most of us, it's loved ones who've passed. You know what I mean? Because they know us, they know us in and out. They love us dearly. They want to see us through things. They want to make sure that we're making the right decisions in life. So in my opinion, our spirit guides are people that we've lost that we love. But as far as like kind of connecting the two sides together, I think that that's something as well. I have two guides that are my brothers actually that passed at birth. So I actually have two scars that are on my stomach from when their umbilical cords wrapped around my stomach. And unfortunately, they passed at birth, but I found through my studies and kind of learning about mediumship that they kind of watch out for me as spirit guides as well. So they're my two main guides.
So were you triplets?
I was.
Originally.
I was a triplet, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Michael was saying that when he met you, David he kind of was facilitating an event at Maricopa Sol. What's the process like when you work with someone or have an engagement with someone? Like, what does that look like, and why are some of the people contacting you, and how does it work?
That's a great question. So like I said, it comes through in different ways, and each communicator, and when I say communicator, I mean people who have passed, will come through differently. If you were a kind of a metaphorical person while you were here, you're gonna speak to me in metaphors as you would. If you're a very kind of visual person, you're gonna use the clairvoyance or clear seeing is what they call it. If you're a very sensitive person, you might come through as clairsentience, which is a clear feeling. So it really depends on the person and the communication. But how it works for me is that I kind of try to blend all of them together to get the clearest picture as I possibly can. You know what I mean? The more broad of my clairs that I use, the more I can kind of get information to kind of fill in the gaps and make sure that people know exactly like, yes, this is my loved one. And it's not, it's not a vague message like, hey, there's somebody around you. They're a light in the world. They love you. Like that's kind of vague. You know what I mean? What I try to do is I try to be as evidential as possible. And through those mediumship faculties is how I'm able to do that.
And so is it something that you can turn on and off?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to, or I'll go nuts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So like you might just like be in the grocery store and all of a sudden, bam, if you have it on.
If I'm tuned in, yeah, I could be walking by somebody and maybe their loved one will be like, hey, I want to talk to them. But what I do is I tell them very politely, I say, look, if you want me to talk with them, if you want me to give you that message to them, have them come to me and I will happily pass that message on. Otherwise, like it's ethically not terribly right to go up to somebody and just say, hey, I have a grandmother here. And, she says X, Y, and Z, because like, you never know what somebody's emotional state's going to be. Yep. I could go up to somebody and say, hey, your grandmother's here or your mother's here, but maybe their mother only passed 2 days ago and it's still very fresh in their hearts. And then they break down in the middle of the grocery store and then they're humiliated, so it's a very like sensitive thing. So that's why ethically, I don't necessarily go up to somebody and just say, hey, here's a message for you, because you never know where their mental state's going to be.
How do you tune in and tune out? Like, what are some of the things that you actually do in order to kind of shut things off? Or is it something that happens on their part?
That's a great question too. And it takes, I think, a little bit of both, a little bit of like building that relationship with the spirit world and just letting them know that like, hey, when I'm working, I will absolutely give the 100% best messages I possibly can. And then when I'm not reading and when I'm not working, like it's time for me to be me. and just kind of refill my spiritual cup, as it were. Like I said, I play in a band, I do martial arts. So those are things that are cathartic for me. I play video games, I love video games. So like when it's time for me to shut down, like that's what I'm doing. I'm just being a regular guy and I'm just being me. And I've learned to kind of talk with the spirit world and just say, hey, look, when it's time to shut down, it's time to shut down. And I need that privacy and I need that kind of like step back.
Yeah.
So do the spirits ever give any kind of insight as to like what's on the other side? Like
that's, it's interesting because they've definitely told me that it's a place of unconditional love and light. It's a place of beauty. They're very happy where they are. But one message that I get over and over and over again is just stay here as long as possible. Really, live your life to the fullest and just kind of experience what life has to offer. Because like once you're on the other side, you're on the other side, and there's no returning.
So there's no reincarnation, anything?
Not that I've run across. It's not to say that that's not. I just don't necessarily know if it is. It's one of those plausible things, reincarnation, I think. But they do encourage you to live a life to the fullest and kind of stay here as long as you possibly can. That's what I've gathered from what I've been reading.
When it comes to someone on the other side and wanting to connect with someone in the world that we live in, what's a lot of them? Do you know what some of the motivation is for, some of these spirits of why are they looking to engage us? Because it does seem like that they're reaching out.
Yeah. So it manifests in different ways. Sometimes it's a father telling their daughter that he didn't say, I love you as much as he would have liked to. Sometimes it's somebody who passed from suicide who says they're sorry that they went that way, that they made the wrong choice, that they didn't quite know what was going on. And sometimes it's just a message of love and just saying like, hey, I still remember you. I still remember the times that we shared together and I love you dearly for that. And so just keeping those memories and those core moments in their hearts can help a lot of people just realize that like afterlife love continues and it's not just a physical world thing. Like love is truly a consciousness and afterworld thing as well.
Is there any sort of like bad news that you ever get, like where there are warning or something like that? Like,
yeah, I have had a couple of readings actually. I could say one in particular. There was a gentleman who he was terminally ill. He was dying of cancer, and unfortunately, the spirit world told me that. And again, a lot of this works with ethics. You know what I mean? I didn't just flat out say, hey, you're passing from cancer, because that would be rude. But what I did say is, listen, no matter what, the spirit world has your back. You are loved. You are going to be okay. You know what I mean? But when I first addressed it, I said, I understand the situation you're in. And he got kind of mad at me. He's like, what situation's that? And I was like, well, the one that you're in, I understand is very severe and is very intense. So what I'm going to tell you is that you are going to be okay and that you are loved. And that, once it's your time, your loved ones will be there waiting for you. And that's kind of how I handled that.
Raising money for a cause, supporting our neighbors, helping to recognize those that should be recognized, providing educational opportunities, working together to make someone's day just a bit brighter. Our employees enjoy being a part of making our communities a better place to live and work. Skowhegan Savings Bank.
Have you ever had a really kind of a strange interaction or kind of a strange experience, with dealing with someone on the other side?
In what way?
Something unusual, and maybe it's unusual all the time, but have you ever had a unusual for you, a strange interaction, or are they all kind of similar?
I think when it gets really evidential, that's when it's kind of strange and unusual for me, but in the best possible way. I was doing a reading for a woman and I said, there's a dog coming through. She says her name is Lady. And she literally looked at me. She goes, yeah, she's in that picture right behind you. And so that was very kind of strange to me. And I thought it was, but it was a very beautiful thing as well. It was very evidential. But so in that way, it's odd just because like, sometimes I say things in readings that like it boggles my mind, and I'm like, how the heck did I come up with that? And it's not me coming up with it; it's them. But that's what I think is kind of. But as far as like odd or scary or anything like that, it's not usually. It's just some of the messages are odd. Actually, if I can elaborate,
sure. Yes, please.
And I don't know what I'm allowed to say or what I'm not.
You can say whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Perfect. So there was one time I was doing a reading, and this woman's loved one, she passed when she was 23. They were they were promiscuous when they were younger. And her friend came through for her, and she was like, oh, tell her how much of a slut we used to be. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I can't say that. And sure enough, the woman on the other side kept telling me over and over again, tell her. And so I broke my ethical code and I said, yeah, your friend's telling me what a slut she was. And she goes, oh my God, that's her. You got her. You know, and that was the evidence she needed. That's all. It was just like, are you kidding me? So like when it comes to weird and odd, like that can be very off-putting. And of course I was sweating I'm like, oh my God, like, please don't make me say this. But yeah, sure enough, that was the evidence that she needed to know that her friend was on the other side and that she was doing okay.
I was just thinking about the story about the little boy playing. It seems like that there are spirits that are interested in connecting with specific people, but then there's also spirits maybe somehow connected to or attached to places.
Yes. And I think the reason why is because they had such a good time there, or even such a bad time. And they're trying to kind of figure out how they can, like redo the past, I think sometimes, because if you're stuck in a certain location, you might be like, and if you're stuck in a certain location, you might be thinking like, why would they stay there? Especially if it was a bad thing, you know what I mean? But I think that there's, are you familiar with Harry Potter?
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, Voldemort has his Horcruxes.
Yep.
So I feel like humans have Horcruxes as well. So like if you're in a bad situation, and like say like Penhurst Asylum, for example, there's a lot of bad things that happen at Penhurst Asylum, and there's a lot of spirits that still dwell there. But I feel like it's just a piece of them that stays there. It's not their full consciousness that hangs on. Does that make sense?
So it's almost like that they've left something behind, even though it's not entirely them.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I truly believe. Just a piece of them stays there. And it's because of maybe the past trauma that they want to leave behind, perhaps, or something to that effect.
So are there any bad spirits that just linger around, like they might have lived a bad life? And
he's a big fan of The Conjuring. Actually, yeah. we both are, but just, when we see horror films, we see, a lot of stuff in media kind of related in this, how much is fact versus fiction from your experience?
I can tell you honestly, I've been to the Conjuring house 3 times. The only really negative thing that has ever happened to me at the Conjuring house is I was leaving it the 3rd time and I got a bloody nose, and I've never had a bloody nose in my entire life. And I was wild. It was just a slow drip and just steadily. And I was like, holy cow, and it wouldn't stop. The Conjuring house is definitely haunted. Definitely got a lot of weird and spirits there. But I think to answer your question, like, is there evilness out there? Yeah. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Yeah. Like, is there negativity out there? Yeah. I think there is, because there's a balance to the universe. And everything works in conjunction with good and evil, good and bad, that sort of thing, and that balance of negative and positive. So I think that there are negative spirits out there. But I also think that, like, let's say you had a grandfather that was just a grouchy old bugger for his whole life. Chances are in the afterlife, he's going to be grouchy. So he's going to come through and he's going to be like, I don't want to talk about this, and this is stupid, and things like that. So it depends on their personalities as well.
So it really does depend on how they live their life. And okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, they do go to a place of unconditional love and light, and they are changed. But what they don't change is their evidence that you know who they are. That's what I think stays as most positive. Like I said, if Grandpa was a grump, he's going to come through as being a grump. He's not going to come through and say, oh, I love you so much. That was such a great guy, because the person across from me is going to go, no, he wasn't. Like, he was a grouchy old bastard. So I think that stays. But as far as good and evil, there's definitely not so great spirits out there, as well as really great ones.
Have you ever encountered any? Like, Yep. I always wondered that, like, can you turn that off, like, from them coming through, or like?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So especially in readings, like the first time I was at the Conjuring house, I did 10 readings for folks while I was there. It was all in the library, and you would think that during that time that any number of those spirits that dwell in the house would come to see and interrupt or kind of do that, but they didn't. They were respectful and they kept their distance. But I also throw out the vibration of love when I work. That unconditional love, that unconditional light, that people that you want to talk to and that are out there that you love that have passed. And so I don't think that they go in the same vibration. I had a shadow figure follow me home once, And I woke up in the middle of the night. It was at the foot of my bed, and I'm like, "Holy shit! Like, there's a ghost at the end of my bed." And at first, I was terrified, but that's what it wanted, because it vibrates on that vibration of negativity and fear and anxiety. So what I did was I sent it love, and I was like, you just wanted to follow me home. I was like, you just want to make sure I got here okay, didn't you? And I was like, you wanted to make sure that I was like, taken care of. I was like, what a good guy. I was like, thank you so much. I love you for that. And it was like, ugh. Like it recoiled, and then it went away because I was on that vibration of love, and it doesn't follow that. So it's like, it's kind of interesting how that worked.
So when you were at the Conjuring House, like you went through, I take it you went through the museum with all the objects that they have there.
That's the Ed and Lorraine Warren Museum. That's in a different spot.
Okay.
The Conjuring House is in Harrisville, Rhode Island.
Oh,
that's the farmhouse where the movie was inspired.
Okay.
By. Yep. Yeah. But that house is wild. If you ever get a chance to go there, I would recommend it.
Have you been to the Ed and Lorraine Warren house at all, or no?
Unfortunately not. I would love to go, but I haven't been there yet.
Because I mean, I assume like you're familiar with the objects there,
like Annabelle's there,
Annabelle and all of that. Like, how does that happen to where like you could have like a spirit possess like an inanimate object like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that this might be kind of contradictory or controversial to some folks, but I truly think that sometimes we give things too much power. You know what I mean? If I was to tell you that mug right there is completely haunted, and if you touch that, you're cursed, you might be like, I'm not going to go near that. And if you do touch it, you might manifest something that you would think is, I touched the bottle, now it's cursed.
That's interesting. Yeah.
At least that's in my personal opinion. But there could also very well be an attachment of negativity that's on there, like a shadow person or something like that feeds off of that wants you to be scared of it. You know what I mean? So I think that's the case with most things.
Is this a skill that you have been able to hone and shape and develop over time?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you discover being able to learn to develop the skill?
Like I said, so the house in Parsonsfield, and what I did was, I YouTubed what it means to be a medium, and it said you might be a medium if you feel this way, or if you see this, or if you're acting like this. And I said, okay, that checks off all the boxes. And then I was like, okay, so what does a medium do? They give readings, I guess. And so I looked into what that meant as well. And so I found different advisors over the years and different people that knew more about spirituality and knew more about psychic readings than I did, and they were able to give me kind of like clarity as to how it works and the mechanics of it all. And when I first started, it was, I wasn't nearly as tuned in as I am now. And hopefully I'll get even more tuned in as I go. I mean, I'm always learning, I'm always developing, and that'll never stop. There's a lot of mentors along the way and a lot of things like that helped me kind of develop this and get this kind of dialed into so I could do it for other people.
Very cool. And like most people that come in, do you find like, that they come in with a hint of skepticism, or they're already believers, or like, what do you find in terms of clients that will come in for a reading?
It's a healthy dose of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's sometimes like I did a group reading, and there was a guy that literally came in. He was about, he was like 10 minutes late or so, and I'd already jumped into a reading, and he's just sitting there with his arms crossed, and he's just kind of staring at me. He's got sunglasses on, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Like he's the one. He's the guy that's trying to debunk all this. And then sure enough, I came to him in the reading. Somebody came through for him, and he goes, oh shit. And I was able to do a reading for him. And afterwards he thanked me, and he said, you know what? I came in here trying to debunk you. And he's like, and thankfully he's like, you turned out to be legit. He's like, so thank you for the message and thank you for what you do. And I thought that was a beautiful thing, but it's a mix of both. I mean, for the most part, people come in and they're not really skeptical. They know what they're signing up for. They know what they want to get. And as long as I'm able to deliver, then they're like, okay, this is okay. I definitely have met my fair share of skeptics.
Now, in downtown Augusta, is there any place that you've walked around that you kind of feel heavier than others, or?
There's certainly on the same side of the street as Merkaba Soul, there's what I feel like is a lady that hangs out in some of the upper levels. Which is really interesting. And she kind of like, she'll look in the windows and she'll look out, and I almost feel like it's come from when there was a fire down here.
Really?
If that makes any sense. Because there was a big fire down here.
There was a big fire.
Yep. So I almost feel like she's related to that, and she's kind of like looking out and just kind of making sure that everything's safe and everything's taken care of. But I've kind of felt her pretty heavily. And the Masonic temple there, has got a lot of energy there too. I'm not necessarily sure if it's haunted or not, but I know that like when I walk past there, when I drive by it to go down the river to park, I'm like, whew, that building's got like some energy. This one does too, actually.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned that we all have this gift. How can we tap into it?
It's just as easy as trusting that the spirit world is out there. And that's a really hard thing because it's something that's unseen. It's for the most part unfelt by a lot of people because a lot of people are turned off from it. But how can you tune into it? You can meditate and you can set the intention of connecting with spirit. Like for a lot of the times I call it sitting in the power for mediums is what I do is I'll close my eyes and I'll say to myself, I want to sit in the love and the power of spirit. And I'll just kind of repeat that mantra over and over in my head. And then I'll just kind of get drifted away into that meditation with it. As long as you have that mantra, as long as you have that kind of like those words repeating in your mind, other things can't filter in and kind of like distract you. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a lot how mediumship works is I'm able to clear my mind. So I step aside and then they step forward. Like I'm a pretty shy person, believe it or not. And, I'm very kind of private. Well, I can't say I'm private, but I'm a very shy person anyway. So when I get up in front of a crowd, I literally have to let my guides and the spirit world take over because I would probably just shit my pants just because I was so scared, you know, because I don't do well in front of people. And that's one of the major things about all this is crazy is that the spirit world truly kind of can step in and take over and allow you to do the work, even if you're a shy person.
So your two guides were twin brother triplet. They're boys.
Yep.
So have you had experiences with them? Like, have you had a chance, like, do you get a chance to get to know them even though that they died when they were so young?
That's a great question. And, I have got to know them in a different way. They're kind of snarky. They're kind of sarcastic, but I need that in my life. And I think they know that. So that's kind of like I used to hear, and to be completely honest with you, doctors thought I was crazy. They thought I had schizoaffective disorder, which is basically hearing voices in your head because I told them I did. And what I realized was that it was my brothers talking to me and communicating with me as opposed to me actually hearing negative voices because it wasn't negative. It wasn't anything like go kill yourself or anything like that. It was very positive. It was very reassuring along with the snarkiness, but like it was guiding me along and it was actually helping me make the right decisions in life. So that kind of helped me get to know them a little better and helped me get to build that relationship with them. And it actually took another medium to say that they were them before I realized who they were because, you know, they passed before I was actually born. So I had no facial recognition, no names, no anything like that. So when I was growing up, I just knew that there was these two entities or these two beings that were next to me and I didn't know what they were. I didn't have a face for them. I didn't have a name and I just felt them. And like I said, it took a medium to say that, yeah, those are your brothers. And I was like, holy cow, like that's incredible.
And did you know that from a young age that you had, that there were originally three of you? Like, is that something that you grew up knowing?
Yeah, because of the scars on my stomach, it was very evident that they were there. And I would always ask like, you know, how did this happen? Because like nobody else had those scars on their stomach and they're I'll show you, they're pretty big. So I knew from a very early age that they were gone and that I was a triplet, but I didn't always know that they were my spirit guides for sure. Yeah.
What's been your experience with Halloween at all? Like, do you notice anything at that time of year? Are there certain times of the year where you may experience things?
Yeah. Some people say the veil gets thinner.
Yeah. And it's funny because like, you know, for me, the veil has to be thin year round or else I can't do my job. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think the veil is necessarily this thing that kind of ebbs and flows. I don't even think it exists at all. I think we are all surrounded by that energy and we're all surrounded by the loved ones that we've lost. They don't go anywhere. It's not harder to reach them at any certain times of year. But what this season does is there's a lot of death. You know what I mean? The trees are dying, the plants are going away, things like that. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of spiritual energy as far as that's concerned that amps things up, not necessarily makes it thinner or thicker, but just amps it up a little bit more. And plus people's interest in it at all. That definitely helps because people are more apt to be like, okay, well, there's spirit around me during Halloween than they are during Christmas time necessarily, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So to answer your question, I don't think the veil is really there. I think it's just something that people have, it's like a Hallmark holiday.
Yeah. Yep.
So if you are like, for example, like, you know, taking a nice quiet walk through a cemetery, no one's around you, do you feel like people are still like on the other side are coming through still, or
it's a great question too, and not a lot of times would I walk through a cemetery, because like, why would you want to hang out where you're laid to rest? You know what I mean? You could be anywhere else in the world. So it's like, people are like, well, why? I mean, that's not to say that when you go visit your loved ones that they're not going to be with you, because they're with you all the time. So they're going to make sure that they're going to make their presence known. Like I've had people say that like they've gone to people's gravestones and then a butterfly or a dragonfly will land on the headstone and they'll know that that's their loved one. And that's how they'll send signs to you as well. But in a cemetery like that, I don't think they're hanging out much. And if they do, it's those Horcruxes that I was talking about. There's a piece of them there, but it's not the full person.
It's not the full person.
Yeah.
I found the two cemeteries up on Winthrop Hill. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely beautiful. Actually quite park-like.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And I feel like you can have that kind of like that park kind of like cathartic, mellowed out vibe in cemeteries a lot. And it's not so much, but once it's nighttime, people get it in their heads. They're like, oh, it's dark. And then the spirits are alive. They're coming out. They're in full droves. You know what I mean? But, there's a lot of history in those cemeteries too. So I would not be surprised at all if those pieces of people interact with you.
Yeah. I was just wondering, with the work that you do, has this made an impact on you on kind of a personal, emotional, spiritual level?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a reverend of spiritualism now as a result of this. So it's interesting as a reverend, I don't go to church or things like that. I feel like church is nature. I feel like if you go out on your porch and the birds are chirping and the sun is shining, even if it's raining, that God is with you and that you're around. But that's one thing that has changed me a lot is being more, having a knowledge and a belief in God. And I never had that before. I was an atheist for 33 years. I didn't believe in any of it. If you had told me I was going to be a medium 8 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. Just because I was like, no possible way. So it has definitely changed me a lot. I feel like I'm a better person as a result. You know what I mean? I feel like I've made better decisions in life, and I feel like I'm guided more by a positive energy than my own devices.
So what do you say to those people that are like, oh, well, it's demonic gift and, they're communicating with, with evil and everything. You're saying absolutely not, that, it's all about, it's just another way to connect with God, essentially.
Absolutely. It's another way to connect with God. It's a way to connect with your loved ones. People say that it's evil, but my hilarious argument to that is like, okay, if a demon comes through, he's not going to say, I love you so much. If a demon comes through, he's not going to say, I care about you and I want you to do well. And yes, take that job because that's going to be the best thing for you. Or, hey, you're pregnant and congratulations. A demon's going to say bad things. They're going to say, no, don't take that job. They're going to say, you're not pregnant and you never will be. They're going to say awful things because that's their vibration. Yep. So for people that say that it's a negative and thing, I disagree. But that's a very kind of religious viewpoint. I feel like there's a lot of religions that say, unless you are connecting directly to God, there is no other person that should be allowed to connect with your loved ones. But it's our God-given right, in my opinion. Like I said, we all have this gift. God bestowed it upon us, I feel like, and we all have the ability to tap into it.
So in a philosophical, more of a philosophical question, I guess, sure, is do you believe that we kind of determine our own path here, like by the choices that we make? Like, I guess it's a two-parter question. The other part is, do the spirits that come to us, we all have this, like, are they sort of the conscience in our head telling us don't do this, or, like your gut feeling?
Yeah. And I feel like they amplify our gut feeling, or they definitely validate our gut feelings for us. Like in readings, for example, someone, might be thinking, do I divorce my husband because this is a negative kind of toxic relationship? And then spirit might come through and say, yeah, it might be in your best interest to. One good thing about that is that we all have free will. And so we can choose to listen or we can choose to not listen. It's all up to us. What was the first part of the question again? I'm sorry.
So yeah, that basically was the question, is whether whether we indeed have like free will or whether it's fate.
I see. Yeah. And I truly believe that we all have free will. So our loved ones can tell us all day long, just as if we were here. Like your mom could tell you, don't go out with those boys because they're nothing but trouble. And you could say, well, I'm going anyway. Like me and the boys are having fun tonight. And then all of a sudden you get arrested and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I actually wrote a book called I Fucking Knew It because of that reason. Because like, because I would so many times I wouldn't listen to my intuition. I wouldn't listen to my gut and, or my loved ones. And then I would do the opposite. And then I'd feel like, I know I shouldn't have done that. And, I knew I shouldn't have done that. And that's kind of like a booster to our intuition, like I said. And so I feel like we all have that. And we all have had those moments where you're like, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Right. You know what I mean? I'm sure that most people have. So that's what I contribute that to. It's just not listening to your intuition, not listening to your guides, and then doing the opposite and then finding out what happens afterwards.
So tell us a little bit about, like, if someone in Augusta wants a reading, where are they going to be able to find you?
So they can find me right on facebook.com/psychic medium Christopher. So that's the best way to find me. I'm actually doing readings out of Merkaba Soul now full time. So I'll have an office starting November 1st. And so they can find me there as well.
Maybe just quickly describe what would a session look like? How long is it going to take? And what should someone do to be prepared?
So really, if it's up to you whether you want to put the intention out, like I want to speak to one person individually. I can't control who comes through. There's times where someone's like, I want to hear from my brother. I want to hear from my brother. And then their neighbor comes through who, helped them with their homework one day. And it's like it's kind of random in that sense. But what they can do is they can put that intention out there that they want to speak with certain loved ones, because then they'll hear it and they'll listen to the call and they'll say, okay, well, she really wants to talk to me, so I should probably come through for her or him, depending on who's sitting down with me. And as far as length of time, it really depends on how much time you want to sit with me. Sometimes people go for a half an hour. Sometimes people go for a full hour. I encourage both. Both can be very impactful. Both can be very important. And it's really like, I truly feel like if somebody sits down with me for a half an hour, they're not going to get gypped. You know what I mean? Or it's just, how long do you want to sit for? How long do you want to be there hanging out with me and talking?
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you very much for spending some time with us today.
Oh, thank you very much. This has been a blast.
Thank you.